G'day you terrific troop of tactical testicles and welcome back to Hitman 3. Now Hitman, at least on my channel over the past 5 or so years, has become known as a sandbox game where hilariously tragic things happen to pretty much everyone and where the word stealth has been completely erased from the dictionary. But what if I were to go against everything I believed in and actually went full tactical testicle? Is it possible to beat the entirety of Hitman 3 as a silent assassin, using only your starting suit and never being spotted by anyone for even a fraction of a second? Well, today we're going to find out. The rules for this challenge are as follows. I will be playing through every mission in Hitman 3 on master difficulty. I must be awarded with the unnoticed, targets only, silent assassin, and suit only rankings at the completion of each and every mission. I can't do anything ridiculously absurd that would give anyone reason to think that any of the targets had been killed by an assassin, and I cannot harm anybody except the targets in any way, shape, or form. This includes pacification. Last and definitely not least, I cannot be spotted by anybody whatsoever. What I mean by that is that any action that triggers the attention of anybody on any level will result in an immediate fail, even if it's only for a split second. And with that, let's get started. My journey began in the Burj Al Ghazirga in Dubai, where I immediately knew I had to be on my best behavior as there are literally eyes everywhere on this mission. So, with that in mind, I casually made my way up the stairs and across the main auditorium area as unsuspiciously as I could for a fully grown man with a rubber ducky hoodie on and a barcode tattooed on the back of his head. Nevertheless, What's-Her-Face's art exhibition seemed like a pretty good starting point, as I recalled vaguely there being some shallow water that old mate regularly came to have a splash in whilst admiring whatever the hell that big red thing was on the wall. It was also the perfect location for me to casually plonk down a remote taser. I then patiently waited, detonator in hand, for him to unwittingly stand in the middle of the water, and then I then got to thinking about how I could silently take down my next target, Carlos, and remembered that on his route around the upper floors of Burj Al Ghazirga, he liked to stop for a glass of whiskey in the living room area. Getting up there, however, dressed as a bald duck with sunnies on was going to be tricky as nobody was buying what I was selling. But I did know that if I went through the botanical garden area, there was a scalable facade on the outside that would lead me up to the helipad, so I did what any other sane person would do, and I launched myself off the edge of the building. It was fine though, as I had assessed the risk beforehand and the drop was insignificant. I then hopped onto the ladder and I climbed my way to the top, ensuring that the 2 guards patrolling the helipad never laid an eye on me, and I carefully snuck past the helicopter pilot, simultaneously deciding on my escape route once the 2 targets had been dispatched. For that to work, however, I would need the helicopter key, so I slid down the ladder and collected it before heading back up to deal with Carlos. Using the yellow shortcut ladder, I climbed up to the air conditioning area on the roof, making sure I didn't get spotted by the repairman up there, and I slipped into the living room where I proceeded to steal 2 fancy, completely priceless, one-of-a-kind eggs, even though they're 2. And having absolutely no concept of value whatsoever, I proceeded to throw and smash the priceless eggs in an attempt to distract the guard. Capitalizing on the brief opportunity I'd created, I snuck around the corner and proceeded to pump Carlos's whiskey full of lethal poison. Then, with the coast clear, I snuck back out again the way I came, waited patiently for the moment of truth, and it was indeed true that drinking poison kills, and I threw and smashed the remaining priceless egg to create another distraction for the helicopter pilot, allowing me to dash out from cover, steal his chopper, and fly off into the sunset, completely undetected like the true tactical testicle that I am. Next up, it was time for me to head to Dartmoor, England. Voted most pleasant place to live 0 years in a row. I knew that my target, Alexa Carlisle, started her journey around the castle from her office right at the top. Then I also knew that if I could get there fast enough, I'd be able to poison her morning cup of tea before she went to drink it. Now, getting around the dozens of guards was pretty tough, and they all seemed to have spider senses. But through a whole bunch of trial and error, I eventually found a very clear path that led me directly to where I needed to go. Basically had me run past the stairs, over this ledge, and then straight up this drain pipe. I was then able to use this little ledge here to shimmy my way to the right around the side of the castle and up the drain pipe that would lead me to either the roof via the yellow shortcut ladder or through a window to the right that would place me directly outside the target's bedroom. Obviously that was what I was going for, so I headed to the right and hoisted myself straight up and through the window, then cracked out my coins and I used them to distract the maid and the guard next to her long enough for me to slip behind both of them and into the laundry that would then again lead to the bedroom. I then used my remaining 2 coins to create 2 distractions for both the butler and the maid, ensuring that I threw the coins far enough away from each other so I didn't accidentally double distract either of them, which gave me clear and uninterrupted access to poison the tea. The staff room was my way back out again, but there was a maid, 2 guards, and Alexa on the other side, so I had to time it perfectly, but when I did, I slipped out and jumped back out the window I came through. I then shimmied my way in the opposite direction up the shortcut ladder that would take me to the roof just in time to see Alexa die, and hopped through the window to put the next part of my plan into action. I headed up to the top and grabbed the hunting rifle, and then stealthily took it back downstairs, where I very quietly placed it on the floor and used my stolen scissors to alert the guard to the fact that there was a gun on the floor, at which time he picked it up and decided to walk to the other side of the castle to stuff it in the stash box. With him gone and me being extra careful not to get seen by the patrolling guard outside, I snuck over to the safe and opened it with the code that I somehow remembered, then stole Alexa's diary. I hopped over the balcony, climbed down the drain pipe, and shimmied my way to that dead guy's bedroom balcony where I planned to escape via the shortcut ladder. Unfortunately, however, there was a guard there, but as luck would have it, he often looked to the right, which gave me just enough time to slip past him and place my gun on the floor, which he would eventually notice, pick up, and then carry to the other side of the mansion. With him gone, I then slid down the ladder, hid behind the ginormous stack of firewood, and dashed my way into the bushes directly opposite the exit. Using my stolen scissors again for the however manyth time, I threw them and distracted the guard long enough for me to slip past him and the groundskeeper and made my way to freedom. With 2 in the bag, I then headed over to Berlin, where after toasting a bag of marshmallows in the woods, I made my way down the mountains and into the annual Junkie Festival. Before anything else, however, I made a beeline for some bloke's push bike and I stole his bag of dingers from the basket, and then headed into the club's cloakroom via the back door to collect my pistol that I was planning to use as a distraction at some point. After all, I had to take down 5 targets this time. Now, this guy would have been an easy target except for the fact that dumping poison into someone's drink whilst they're surrounded by dozens of people and dressed as a duck is a feat so daring that not even the great tactical testicle himself dared to attempt it. So instead I distracted him and slipped by to take down somebody a little more accessible. This bozo was the perfect mark. After all, he wandered over here by himself and was delightfully responsive to the loud clunk of metal on metal. All that was required at that point was just a little bit of patience and... Now, with 1 down and 4 to go, I sprinted across the courtyard to the staff exit that took me directly to the shortcut leading to the biker gang's secret hideout. And as fate would have it, one of my targets just so happened to be on the other side of the door that I was on the other side of, and I jujitsu'd him to 99% of his life, leaving him with 1%. Get that math up ya. Then, with his remaining 1%, I dragged him up the stairs on his head, only to notice that yet another target was within striking distance and standing in a very precarious position for him. So I kicked a ginormous bag of bricks off the walkway directly onto his head. Then, being a strong believer in comedic timing and having an unconscious target on the floor next to me, I immediately picked him up and tossed him off the building directly on top of the dead guy down below, killing him in the process too. With 3 of 5 down, I traveled a very short distance only to find another target that would be easy pickings as long as I could get rid of his mate, which I did with the old gun on the floor trick. And you know, it works 100% of the time, every time, except on the last mission. But more on that later. I then went and dropped my remote EMP charge into the little puddle of rainwater and summoned the next target over, being very careful not to let him see me through the ginormous open window in the wall. But as soon as he got close enough, I lobbed another item into the puddle, and well, you can guess what happened next when he went to find out what that was. Coincidentally, I then spotted another target in the distance that, if my memory served me correctly, and it almost never does, was going to be relatively easy to deal with using yet again the old gun on the floor trick. I dashed my way across the rooftops and headed down the stairs to place my gun into the travel path of the other biker in the room with my target. Then, once I knew that he'd picked it up and wouldn't be back for a while, I put my plan into action. All it took was one cheeky spray can as a distraction, and I was dashing my way across the room straight to his cup of hot coffee to fill it with hot lethal poison. Then, having escaped far, far away from the scene of the crime, I patiently waited in the stairwell for yet another moment of truth. And once again it was true. Drinking poison kills. Before escaping though, I needed to wait long enough to allow all the remaining undercover ICA agents to flee the nightclub, absolutely terrified of the bald sunglass wearing duck that was silently offing everyone in the night. Ooh, spooky. Once they'd gone, I ran back through the nightclub the way I came in to make my way out, thanked old mate for the dingers, and made my way to freedom. It was at that moment, however, that I realized Agent 47 had clearly never ridden a bike, or he was absolutely wasted. Or both. At this point in my journey, there was nothing I wanted more than a nice succulent Chinese meal, so I headed to China to find one. I unpacked my sniper rifle, stuck it on me extra sticky back, and climbed the drain pipe up to the laundromat's roof. Now, I had a pretty good feeling that I was going to be able to SASO both targets completely undetected from right here on this giant sign thingy, but in order to do that, I would need to shoot down a bunch of spy drones floating around the rooftops, and doing so would eventually cause the crazy white lady with the cornrows and the Chinese dress to come upstairs and argue with the Chinese bloke, who would both unwittingly walk directly into my crosshairs at exactly the same time. Before that, however, I needed to dangle off the roof for a few minutes just while her guards came up to collect the downed drone that had stupidly crashed directly in my sniper's nest, almost giving away my location. But once they'd taken its SD card or whatever and they'd buggered off, it was just a matter of zooming in 3 times and...
both targets in one go. You are good.
I then stealthily made my way down the stairs to the exit that was directly beneath me, but noticed there were a bunch of guards there now. So with a little flick of the old wrist, I tossed me crowbar into the distance to distract them long enough for me to sneak out the door and disappear like the true tactical testicle that I am. With only 2 missions to go, I knew that I needed to up the ante, and Mendo was the place where I could do it. After saying my prayers, I snuck out of the prayer cave and slipped past the first guard outside, then past the second guard on the overpass thingy, and finally past the one at the top of the wall. I pulled myself up the stone facade and hoisted myself over into the courtyard of one of my targets. Then, with some stealth tactics of the testicle kind, I made my way over to the drain pipe that would lead me to the roof, gaining instant access to the target's bedroom and to the attic above. As he and his wife were enjoying a nice morning glass of goon for breakfast, however, I went up and over the roof where I used the balcony on the other side to get into the bedroom and immediately made a beeline to steal his car keys and then his bottle of Viagra from the bathroom, and then I headed straight up to the attic to steal everything else. Rat poison, cannonballs, gunpowder, and of course my remote EMP charge, courtesy of Diana. I then went back downstairs to the balcony and filled his wine glass with rat poison, as I hadn't hydrated anyone yet in this challenge and I was feeling thirsty. Now, one of the technicalities with this plan is that his wife comes upstairs and more often than not she ends up drinking the wine instead of him. So what I had to do was distract his wife repeatedly over and over again so that it became literally impossible for her to ever get anywhere near the wine, resulting in Mr. Target finally drinking it himself and forcing him into the dunny can to spew his guts up. Obviously, I waited in the wardrobe until he was comfortably seated at the toilet, and then I buried him in it. With 1 target down and 1 to go, I dashed out of the room, onto the balcony, over the railing thingy, across the roof, down the drain pipe, and then out of the courtyard gate into the garden below. Using the abundance of lavender to my advantage, I dashed from bush to bush, doing my best to look like a real duck so as not to draw the attention of any of the guards, and stole the earpiece used in the sniper mission story, thinking I could get them to take down my target for me. First, however, I would need to get out of the garden undetected, as I was currently trespassing, and being spotted even for a split second would result in an instant fail. I used a couple of coins I had on me to draw the eyes of everyone in the opposite direction to where I was hiding, and somehow I got over the wall undetected. Then I stole old mate's invitation, as it didn't look like he needed it, and gave it to the maitre d', who welcomed me to the party and gave me a party bag full of crack cocainus. Now, as I said earlier, I stole the earpiece with the intention of using it to get the snipers to take out me target for me, but for whatever reason, when I took a photo of me target, it didn't bloody work, so I was gonna need to find another way to get the bloody job done myself. Fortunately, however, there was a tap behind me connected to the sprinkler system, so I cranked it up and absolutely saturated the grass that I knew me poor target would eventually be walking in or near. Then as she got closer, I cracked out my EMP charge thingy and plonked her right in the middle, distracting her from her nice walk with Diana and causing her to stop with 1 foot directly in the puddle. Unlucky. Then, as she had supposedly died in an accident, nobody was concerned, and I was able to casually walk away and down the stairs to finally rendezvous with Diana for a spicy bit of tango on the dance floor. Oh, baby. Finally, it was time for the final mission, where after indulging in the free party bag of crack cocainist from Mendoza, I woke up absolutely hammered on some train in the middle of Romania. I very stealthily snuck out and turned on the sink, overflowing it and creating a brief distraction that I would use to get by the scientist, but not before stealing his keycard off the table. As soon as old mate went to clean up my mess, I hopped out and continued moving further up the train, swiping the keycard into the reader and gaining access to the next room. I then snuck past another scientist and a guard and grabbed the code off the poster on the wall that I used to open the freezer, where a nice cold makeshift crowbar was waiting for me. I then used the crowbar to pop open the door and immediately realized that I was inappropriately dressed for the occasion. I climbed my way to the top of the first car and headed further down, where I needed to hide patiently inside of this empty crate until the guard passed me by and I was able to jump out and sneak past him. I then went into the next empty car, grabbed the yellow valve that was hidden in the corner and used it to open the sunroof so I could hop out again, and then snuck past the next car that was chock-a-block full of armed guards. I then walked around and picked up everything I could, which was important for my strategy. I even went in here and stole the sleeping guard's pistol that I was never going to fire just in case I needed another distraction. And having stolen that sleeping guard's gun, I decided that I would fit it with a silencer, so I headed over to the workbench and I made one with a spray can. Then I headed to the armory next door and grabbed another gun to use as potentially another distraction. Once more, I moved through another guard-filled room. When the time was right, I hopped out the window, climbed on top of the train, then down the other side very stealthily, sneaking past the window so nobody could ever see me, and into another window where timing was more important than ever, as that guard would sporadically look in my direction, ruining my run if he saw me. But eventually when he wasn't, I piss-bolted out the room and straight out the window, and eventually ended up here, where I scooped up the fuse off the floor and the screwdriver before dashing past the guard when he wasn't looking. Now, it's at about this point where things start to go wrong on this mission repeatedly. Like, there are so many moving parts to this working that if you neglect even one of them, even for a second, everything's just going to fall apart. So I stealthed my way from cover to cover, making sure that nobody saw me, waiting for whatever guard was looking my way to turn around before progressing further up the train, and finally making my way into the next car, where I scooped up the crowbar off the floor and hopped into the box to stop the guard from seeing me whilst he was saluting his commanding officer guy. Once the coast was clear, however, I hopped out and used a can of Coke Zero to create a distraction that would get this guy far enough away for me to hide behind the crate he was standing at. I then circled around the crate thingy, using it as cover to get past him without ever being seen. Now, still carrying the fuse in my pants, it was finally time to use it, as there were two guards down the end that perpetually looked in my direction. So I overloaded the floodlights with the fuse and I sprinted down the end, jumped over the tank and disappeared. The next room involved me sneaking past two open rooms with people in them and then into the third, where I waited for the guard to walk back before heading out, stealing a filthy blood-stained razor from the bathroom and moving on to the second last train car. Now, this part of the mission aged me terribly, because there's a guard right at the end that sees everything you do and there's literally no way to get past him. That is, of course, until I employed the old gun on the floor tactic, where I dropped me gun and then lobbed a bar of soap as far as I could directly between the two NPCs working on their computers. The reason for this was that if I threw it too close, the first NPC would see it and go and tell one of the guards that we'd already passed, but by throwing it in the middle, the second NPC saw the gun and he went to the nearest guard to him, which was the one right at the end of the train car. As soon as he got near and started to head back to his post, I lobbed a hammer at the wall, creating yet another distraction, and somehow managed to hide in the corner well enough for him not to see me or either of the two NPCs as I snuck past both of them. Next, I tossed an icicle on the floor next to the wall to distract this NPC long enough to sneak past her unseen, and then once more did the old gun on the floor trick to get rid of yet another stupid NPC. Having made it this far, there was only one more NPC to get by, so I chucked me filthy razor at the wall, and while she scrambled to pick it up so no one else could steal it, I slipped past her through the door straight to the lever that detached me from the rest of the idiots on the train. Unfortunately, however, once I got to the final boss, his bulletproof glass protected him and there was no other option but to initiate the cutscene that I guess technically resulted in him seeing me. But I took his memory wiping syringe thingy and I stabbed him in the neck with it, which I guess technically means he never saw me anyway. And with that done, I then smashed the emergency brake UFC style, hopped off the train, and I decided to walk home. They found my dead body frozen stiff several years later under 20 feet of snow.